Hello everybody and welcome to another Wooden Railway Custom Spotlight with me, SodaFan2K10, and I'm really excited for this one because today we're taking a look at my personal favourite custom model that I've made to date, and this is Glynn the Coffeepot engine. Glynn was introduced in the series in the 2015 special The Adventure Begins, which was made to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Railway series, and about halfway through Edward alluded to Glynn about being the previous #1 who ran one of the branch lines. And after Thomas earned his branch line and travelled down it for the first time, he discovered Glynn in a siding at Farquhar, all covered in ivy and vegetation. He'd basically been forgotten about, but he wished Thomas well in his new life running the branch line, and later in Series 20 he was reintroduced and discovered by Marion, rescued by Thomas and Percy, and restored to working order by the Earl of Sodor, and sent to work on his estate at Ulstead Castle, where he works today. And I think it's a perfectly fit-in place for him to end up, because he gets to talk with Stephen, who is also one of the oldest engines working on Sodor. And the two, let's just say, have an interesting and a brilliant little dynamic going on. So I really love Glynn. After he was introduced after he was reintroduced to the series in Series 20, I just fell in love with him when we got to learn more about him and his personality, and that's why I wanted to make him. My desire to make him just kept growing every time we saw him, and I finally managed to get around to make him. I'm going to leave a link down in the description to Glynn's wiki page if you want to learn more about him. I'm not going to get into too much more of his detail, but there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to learn about Glynn and his basis and where he fits in the lore, and not just the TV series, but also the Railway series, where his basis comes from, essentially. So if you want to learn more about that, check out the link in the description. But for now, we're going to concentrate on this custom model that I've made of him. It's my favourite custom that I've made, but it's also the most difficult one that I've made as well. Because unlike most custom models, when it comes to making custom models, you tend to find a model that closely represents the one that you want to make. So, for instance, when I made Rex, I used a 2015 mic, because that's just the shape that I wanted. Same with Frankie, Hurricane, Bradford. I just found models that represented or closely matched the shape of the character I wanted to make. But in all of Wooden Railway, there really isn't anything that represents a Coffeepot engine. Even the likes of Brio or Big Jigs that make replica engines of, say, the Flying Scotsman and Mallard and such, no company, I couldn't even find any obscure off-brands that make anything that resembles Glynn. So I had to scratch build him pretty much completely. Almost every part of him I had to make differently. So I had to really think through all the different sections of him and plan out how I was going to achieve the shapes and sizes of everything that I wanted. And let's just say it was a lot of fun to do, but it was also a little bit tricky. So I look at Glynn, and there are 7 key components to what I've made for him here, and we're going to discuss each of these in order. There's the chassis, the running board, the water tank, which, fun fact, I didn't even realise this was his water tank. I always, I never put 2 and 2 together and thought, Glynn is a steam engine, even though he's of a different design, so it never occurred to me where he gets his water, but that's where his face is, apparently his water. There's the boiler, the handrails, the buffer beams, and then the other details such as the face and his name and number and such, and the paintwork. So I'm going to talk to you about the process of making Glynn and everything. So let's start off with the chassis. Well, first of all, let me give you a quick look around Glynn before we talk about all that. So there's the front of him. We'll talk about where the face comes from in a little bit, but you can see I added the lamp at top. There's the side. So he's got his name, he's got his number. On the side I've got some rivet detailing. These are just done with a Sharpie, just little dots all around the side of his tank. We've got his handrails, his boiler is all nicely painted. We've got the black and gold stripes, and the top of it is grey. And he's even got the very tip of it, of this little chimney with the gold at the top as well. And then I've even gone and painted the middle of his wheels, just to add that extra bit of splash of red to them. There's a look at the back, where we've got his buffer beam. And again, I will talk more about that in just a minute. There's the other side, is almost symmetrical. The detail of the rivets is slightly different, just the way they're orientated and the number of them. But that's perfectly fine. And yeah, that is Glynn. He's not a big model, obviously. He's not. He's one of the smallest that I've made, but he is one of the most intricate and trickiest ones that I've had to make. And I will say this as well. Mine is a little more simplistic compared to others that I've seen. There's a user called Thomas Warner Railway Models, and he's made a version of Glynn. And let's just say it's one of the most incredible models I've seen. It's one of the most well detailed as well. He's got all sorts of like little pipework details coming off of the boiler and the water tank and everything, and it's just really it's just a great model to look at. And lots of other people have made Glynn and made more intricate models than mine, but I wanted to make mine a little bit more simple. My design philosophy when it comes to making customs is I like to make mine to kind of represent what a real version would have been. So, for instance, how Learning Curve or Mattel would have made theirs. And I think Mattel would have made a version similar to this, slightly more simplistic. I don't think they would have gone with the extra detail of all the pipework. Perhaps they might have made, some plastic molded detail or something. Certainly, these handrails would have been plastic. Maybe the entire running board and the buffer beams would have been plastic. They definitely wouldn't be this thin, though. But certainly I think this is roughly what Mattel would have done if they'd released Glynn, and that's what I was going for. That's what I always strive to do when it comes to making custom models, because I want them to look, to match style-wise to all the models that they have released. So let's get into talking about how I made Glynn. We'll start off with the chassis, and the chassis actually comes from one of these. This is a tender from a supermarket that I got several years back. I haven't seen them for a while, but it's weird. They come in. They don't come in boxes or anything. Basically, on the shelf of the store, there's like a tray with all these sorts of engines. There's like an engine, a tender, some coaches, some other random little vehicles and what have you. And I know we've joked a while back about how Mattel eventually is going to make us buy, say, Gordon and his tender separately. Well, this company actually does that. You actually do buy the engine and the tender separately. But I bought an extra one because I wanted the chassis. I looked at this and I thought this would be perfect for a Glynn chassis because it's nice and short and it's 4 wheels. So that's what I've done, and this is the body of the tender that this chassis belongs to. So it's nice, it's nice quality wood, what have you, but it's not adhered to the chassis all that well. It's literally just really small dabs of glue. So all I did, you can even see it there, a little bit of a mark right there. All I did was take like a small screwdriver, put it between the tender and the chassis, and it basically just pried it off. It just popped off with little effort. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I'll just keep it around. Maybe just paint the sides and make it into like a coal bunker or something. But I don't know. Or I could very easily just paint this brown and make it a scrap thing. But that's what that is. That's where the chassis came from. The next was the running board. Very simply, this is using balsa wood, and it's the same wood that I've used to make those custom scratch-built red trucks that I have. So I still have loads of this wood left lying around, so I just cut a piece of wood to fit the chassis. Originally, I had it overhanging the magnets, but then when I thought about adding the buffer beams, I also had to trim it back a little bit. But it's very simple. It's just a very simple rectangular piece of wood. Next up came the water tank piece, and I was struggling for a little while to think what I was going to do for it. But what I ended up doing was using an off-brand Jenga block, and it's one of these. I have loads of these because they were really cheap whenever I bought them. And I stocked up on them because I thought, these are woods, they'll fit in with the aesthetic of wooden railway, and I could build things out of them, like bridges and tunnels and sheds and other buildings, what have you. So I have loads of these lying around, and I thought, well, I have plenty of them. I'm not going to miss, one of them if I cut it up. So that's what I did. This is, in fact, the remnants of the one that I cut up. So this is what it looks like, basically, before I painted it. So that's what this is, that the water tank is made out of. And I just thought, it's the perfect piece. It's made of wood. It's the right shape and thickness and everything. And what I ended up doing is, I don't know how well you can see it, but on the front I added some extra little thin bits of wood from like a lollipop stick. And that just helps give the face a little bit of an overhang. It's what Glynn has in the TV series. He has like a little tiny bit of an extension where his face is. That always extends. It's almost like a cutout for the buffer beam to fit in. But that's all that is. And like I mentioned, I didn't realize that this was his water tank. I don't know where the water goes. I'm guessing, it goes down underneath his running board and then goes up into the boiler. That's, the only thing I can imagine. I don't know where his coal is stored. I don't know whether it's supposed to be here and I just didn't realize it and I forgot to add it, but it doesn't matter. I'm not bothered by adding that detail. But yeah, so that's the water tank. I also added the lamp. As you can see, it's just a very small piece of wood, a small piece of circular wood that is painted, and the light is represented by a silver Sharpie. The next part was the boiler, and now this was the part that I was most concerned about. Thinking about making Glynn, I was thinking for several days, honestly, of how I was going to make this. And I thought this is the thing that was going to halt the entire project. So what I did is I actually turned to my father, who is a carpenter by trade. And I talked to him and I showed him, I showed him a picture of Glynn. And I made like a mock-up of the shape out of Lego bricks. Just some round bricks and a dish piece. And I showed it to him and I said, do you have any idea how to make this shape? Like, do you have anything, any like special tools or whatever to make a shape like that, a conical, shape, or do you have anything lying around? And he took one look at it, and he said, "Oh, okay, give me 5 minutes." And he went off to the shed, and he came back a little bit later with the end of a broom handle, and he showed it to me, and he said, "Is this any good?" And I measured it compared to like the width of, other wooden railway items that I had, because this was long before I'd even cut the wood for the running board, and I measured it and it was literally perfect. Like, it couldn't have been better for what I wanted. So he cut off the end of it for me, and I had this circular piece of wood lying around anyway, and so I did this myself. I drilled the hole. I was a little bit off center. I don't know how well you can see that, but yeah, I was just a tiny bit off. But gluing the boiler to the running board, I made sure that this was pointing forward. So, when it's up like this, you can't really tell that it's off center. And yeah, it is really tall. Glynn won't fit into bridges or under tunnels or what have you, or fit into tunnels and under bridges, I should say. But I don't mind. I'm going to be using him on sets, and I can just adjust, the heights of bridges and tunnels myself. He doesn't have to fit through official wooden railway tunnels and bridges and what have you. So I just think the look of him was more important than function. So yeah, that's where that came from, and I'm just really happy that I was able to find a solution to that. So the thing that I was most worried about ended up coming good, and I'm really pleased. Next up was the handrails. And this was also a thing that I was worried about, and I wasn't originally going to add this detail because, like I said, I didn't know what I was going to do for it. So what ended up happening was, when I was thinking ahead as to how I was going to do the number, I am literally useless at doing small numbers and letters with paint. So I was trying to think how I was going to do this. I thought maybe I could print something out and stick it on, but I didn't want to go down that route. But then I thought about using cocktail sticks, the end of a cocktail stick, to draw on the number in paint. And I did a quick test on a piece of cardboard, and it worked out really well. And then just looking at the cocktail sticks more, I thought, you know what, they are actually the perfect shape. So that's what these are. This is just one cocktail stick that's cut up into different sections. Same for the other side. And they're a little bit finicky to get right, to get in the right place. I had to use like a pair of tweezers to get the top one on and in line with the other two. And they're not perfect. Like if I hold Glynn like this, you can see this one on the left is a little bit skewered. You know, I could probably push it to persuade it into place. And then the one on his right is overhanging just a little bit. That's actually what I wanted, a little bit of overhang, but I didn't quite get that on this side. But, you know, it's fine. Like, you know, I don't mind that. It's not meant to be, you know, 100% perfect, because this isn't, you know, this is my custom, not an official thing, so I'm perfectly happy with this. It doesn't bug me that much. I apologize if it bugs you, but it doesn't bother me. So that's the handrails. They're a little bit tricky, but I'm glad they add a lot to this, to the overall look of Glynn. Next up is the buffer beams, and these are made out of card. And when it comes to using card or cardboard in my customs, I view it as in the same way that, like, you know, official wooden railway models use plastic. Like, I try to make my models as much out of wood as possible, but there are just some things that you can't do out of wood, and trying to get something this thin, this narrow out of wood, it would be almost impossible. So, you know, my solution is using card as opposed to plastic. So I hope that makes sense. I cut out the shape. It's like an upside down trapezium. I rounded the corners, and then I cut out a little section to fit the magnet in, and then I traced around it and cut out exactly the same thing, but just cut out then the edges so that they were the exact shape, the exact same shape as the first one I cut. And then I cut out some circles, which was really tricky to do, because I don't have small scissors, I just have standard large scissors. So trying to cut small, you know, pieces of card and try to make them as circular as possible was quite tricky. But I managed to do it, and then all of that was just repeated for the other side, and they were all glued together and painted up. And I think the effect is quite nice. They're in no way in scale to wooden railway like wagons or what have you. So, you know, if I was to put a truck in front of Glynn here, you know, his buffers would be way higher and way sticking out compared to where the buffers would be on wooden railway models. But again, you know, I was going for the look of Glynn more than anything else, and I just think that the buffer beams look quite nice, and I think they're a nice little detail. So what's that so far? Chassis, running board, water tank, boiler, handrails, buffer beam. Now let's talk about the other little details, starting with the face. And it's a pretty unanimous decision at this point to use a thumper face for Glynn, because it's pretty much the exact shape that you want. It's, you know, long. It's wider than it is tall. It's rectangular apart from the top. It is rounded at the top, but that's just unavoidable. The nose isn't quite the right shape, but, you know, you can't get any better with the shape of the mouth and the eyes. So the issue was that back when I was planning to make Glynn, I didn't have a wooden railway thumper. I only had an Ertl one. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I went to a train show and I managed to find a second Ertl thumper, but I did find a wooden railway one as well. So I didn't want to take the face off the only one that I had, but I did want to show really, really quickly what the wooden railway thumper face looks like. And you can see that, you know, it looks, you know, extremely like Glynn. You know, it's got the wide smile, it's got the, you know, the nose, like I said, is a little bit off, but it's not too bad. But you can't get much better than that for Glynn. But because I only had this one, I didn't want to use it. So what I ended up doing was using the Ertl thumper face. And apologies to Ertl fans who don't like seeing the face is ripped off of these. Well, I didn't rip the one off of this. This was actually pretty easy to take off. All I did was there were some screws underneath, and the entire cab section pops off, and the whole cab section is actually hollow, and the face just pops through. So there's not much to taking it off. It's just a case of filing it down in the end. But that's what I did, and I was really surprised to learn that the Ertl face is actually not too dissimilar in size and scale to the wooden railway one. I'm not sure how well you can tell there. Maybe if I turn Glynn upside down, we can see, width-wise, they're almost exactly the same. And height-wise, they're pretty much the same as well. So I thought for sure that the Ertl one was going to be too small, considering that, Ertl is a smaller scale than wooden railway. But I was pleasantly surprised about how similar in scale they were. All I did to modify it, I did file the bottom of it down a little bit, because the area on the Ertl one where the face sits, underneath it, his engine compartment, I guess, is quite rounded, and the face is really rounded underneath to accommodate it. So I did file that away just a bit to try to flatten it out. I didn't want to go too much because it would have cut into his cheek definition, and also his chin definition as well, so I didn't want to go too far with it. I also didn't want to file the top. I could have done just a tiny bit, but, I only would have been able to really do the middle of it before I lost where his eyebrows would go. So I didn't want to do that. Speaking of the eyebrows, I have actually redrawn these ones, because unlike the wooden railway one, where the eyebrows are quite straight across, the one on the Ertl one is, the eyebrows are angled down, and it makes Thumper look more evil, more sinister, or angry, or what have you. But you can't really call him angry when he's got a smiling face. But so I did do that. I used a crafting knife to scrape away the paint that makes up the eyebrows, and I just painted them on. Not painted them on. I used a Sharpie to add them on. And after all that work of getting all the pieces together, I just painted everything, glued it all together. One little thing I didn't do that, I don't know if this is necessary or not, but the area where the pieces all come together, I didn't paint. So I didn't paint underneath the boiler, underneath the water tank, or the areas where they be connecting. I don't know if, that helped or anyway, but it's just something I didn't feel like doing. So I just left like a circular patch and an area underneath the water tank, and left the undersides of these unpainted as well. For painting the boiler, I had some gold paint, but it was enamel paint, I think is what it was, and it just didn't work. It was just way too runny, and literally the minute I touched it to the paint, to the boiler, it just dripped everywhere. So what I ended up doing was using masking tape, and then using a gold Sharpie to get the bands. And I think they look really nice. Like, I'm surprised how well the Sharpie actually works for, on top of painted wood. It looks really nice. He's also got the black stripe at the bottom. The top of the boiler is light grey. Then also the extra details, like I said, I painted the one on with the cocktail stick in yellow. And then the nameplate is it's a screenshot of, from the episode The Christmas Coffeepot. There's a shot of Glynn where a workman is like shining up his nameplate. So I just took that, I added a couple of effects to it to make it a little bit more legible, make it a little stand out a bit more. And then, sorry it's not focusing. And then I cut out some card to stick it on. And yeah, I just did that on both sides. They were really, really tricky to cut out as well, in all fairness, getting the shape of it just right. But overall, like I said, it was quite a tricky model to put together, but it was a lot of fun to think through and plan out all the different components, and when everything was all cut out and put together, it was really nice to to see it all in one piece, and especially after it was all painted, I was just really ecstatic to see it all put together, and I just think it's easily my favourite custom. It's up to you to decide if you think it's my best. I think it's my best, and it was the most fun I've had making a custom. So, with all that said, I want to thank you all very much for watching this long video. I'm sorry for how long it was, but there was just a lot to talk about when it came to Glynn. Be sure to let me know what you think of this custom down below, and all the other ones that I've made, of course. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video that I upload. Thank you all again, and I'll see you then.